Thomas saw her first. He was standing at the maitre d' podium when she came through the glass door, and his face did something that took less than a second, but that anyone watching closely would have known was significant. A recognition that went past the professional and into the personal. The particular expression of a man seeing someone he has not seen in years and understanding from the way she is dressed and who is waiting for her and how she carries herself across a lobby she once crossed 300 times a year with plates on her arms, that the story has been moving in a direction he suspected and is glad to see confirmed. The 5 attorneys at table 7 did not notice Thomas's expression. They stood when Nadia Osei approached, because that is what you do when co-counsel walks in. Gerald Oates, 64 years old, senior partner of Hartwell and Greer, extended his hand. And then he placed her face. And the 11 years between the last time he had seen her and this moment arrived in his chest all at once, and his hand, already extended, did not know what to do with itself. 11 years earlier. This is where it started. The first time Nadia Osei walked into Carver's for her training shift, she was 22 years old and 3 months removed from a future she had planned since she was 16. The plan had been specific: undergraduate in 3 years, law school at 22, bar at 25. She had done the undergraduate in 3 years. She had been accepted to 2 law schools. She had been ready. Then her father's kidneys failed, and the savings account she had been building since her first job at 15, the one that was supposed to cover her first year's tuition, became the account that covered his first 3 months of dialysis before the state insurance came through. She was 22 years old. She was not going to law school that fall, and she needed a job that paid well enough to support 2 futures simultaneously: her father's care and the one she was refusing to abandon. She had been a server before, a chain restaurant in high school, a campus dining hall in college. She knew the work. Carver's was different in the way that Carver's was always different from anything around it. White tablecloths and crystal stemware, and a wine list that started where most restaurants ended. Leather banquette seating along the south wall. Chandeliers overhead that caught the evening light and threw it in patterns across the dark oak floors. It was the kind of restaurant where the city's professional class came to conduct the business of being the city's professional class, to be seen making decisions and solidifying alliances and welcoming new members into the specific fraternity of people who ate at Carver's on a regular basis. Nadia had grown up in Savannah, but had not grown up in rooms like this one. She noted the difference and set it aside. She was there to work. Thomas, the maitre d', had worked at Carver's for 8 years when Nadia arrived. He was 51 years old, black. The kind of man who had made himself indispensable in a particular world through decades of competence and discretion and the specific gift of making every person who walked through a door feel that they had been expected. He trained Nadia her first week. He told her the things that mattered: the wine list, the regulars and their preferences, the way the kitchen communicated during the weeds, the importance of reading a table from the moment it was seated, rather than waiting to be told what it needed. He told her one other thing, on the last day of her training, that he said because he had seen something in her that he could not name but recognized: that the work was the work, and the person doing it was never the work, and that some rooms would try to make her forget the difference, and that she should not let them. She did not let them, not once. In 11 years. The Hartwell and Greer table came on Thursdays. 5 attorneys, rotating slightly in composition over the years, but anchored by Gerald Oates, who was the kind of man whose presence organized a room, not because he was loud or demanding, but because the room had been organized around men like him for so long that it had learned to do it automatically. He ordered the same thing every Thursday: the salmon. No sauce, sparkling water, a glass of the Burgundy he'd been drinking since 1997, and that Carver's kept in stock, partly because of him. He left a 20% tip to the dollar. He knew Nadia's name within 3 weeks of her starting. He was good with names, genuinely, which was one of the things that made him effective, and also one of the things that made what happened later harder to understand in certain ways, and easier to understand in others. For 3 years, the relationship between Nadia and the Hartwell and Greer table was professional and warm and entirely defined by its surface. She brought them what they ordered. She answered questions about the menu. She occasionally said something that made them laugh, because she was quick, and because laughter was part of the work, and because she was good at the work. They called her by her first name, and tipped well, and asked, twice, whether she had thought about going back to school, and both times she smiled and said she was working on it. She was working on it. Every night after her closing shift, Nadia drove home in a used Civic she maintained with the same precise attention she gave everything that mattered. And she changed out of her Carver's uniform, and she opened the laptop she had bought with her first 3 months of tip income, and she studied. Not casually. With the intensity of someone who understands that the time available to her is finite, and that the margin between what she wants and what the timeline allows is exactly as wide as her discipline makes it. She had enrolled in a paralegal certificate program first, not because she wanted to be a paralegal, but because she needed the structure and the access to legal materials, and the entry point that the certificate provided into the profession she was going to enter one way or another. The certificate took 18 months. She finished it in 14. Then she enrolled in the evening division of a law school in Savannah, a smaller program, not the school she had originally been accepted to, but accredited and rigorous and manageable on a schedule that required her to be at Carver's by 4 and in class by 7 on 3 nights a week. She did not tell anyone at Carver's. She did not tell the Hartwell and Greer table. She did not tell anyone in the legal community of Savannah, which was smaller than it looked, and in which her face had already been fixed, in the minds of the people who recognized it, to the white tablecloth and the crystal stemware and the salmon with no sauce. She had thought about this carefully and decided that the story she was building required privacy to build, not secrecy. She was not ashamed of a single hour of what she was doing, but privacy. The difference was that she was choosing it. She studied on the nights she worked and on the nights she didn't. She studied in the Carver's break room between the dinner rush and the late seating. She studied in her car in the parking structure when the shifts ran long, and she didn't want to lose the thread of what she was working through. She had one casebook that she carried everywhere. A civil procedure text she had annotated so thoroughly that the margins were full in 3 colors of ink by the time she was finished with it, and she kept it in the same bag as her uniform, which meant that on some nights she walked into Carver's with federal rules of civil procedure tucked beneath her serving apron. The first attempt at the bar failed in the essay section, in a question on commercial paper that she had prepared for and answered incorrectly in a way she understood immediately when she saw the results. She went back to the material. She found the gap. She closed it. The second attempt failed in the MB by 4 points. She analyzed every wrong answer, category by category, and understood that the pattern was in secured transactions and that the problem was not knowledge but speed. She knew the material and was not fast enough in the specific testing format to deploy it within the time constraint. She drilled speed for 3 months. The third attempt. On a Tuesday morning in July, she finished the MBA with 12 minutes remaining and knew before she walked out. Her father's dialysis went well for 4 years and then went badly in the 5th, and she took a leave from the law school for 1 semester and returned to it the following semester without losing her standing. because she had earned the kind of standing that does not slip. She passed the bar on her third attempt, at 35, on a Tuesday morning in July. She called her father from the parking lot of the testing center. He said he knew she would get there. She said she had always known that too. He asked what she was going to do next. She said she was going to build something. He asked what kind of something. She said the kind that would last longer than she needed it to. Then came the Thursday. It all shifted. Not the last Thursday she worked at Carver's. She would work another 8 months after this, but the Thursday that planted something in her chest that took those 8 months to become a decision. The Hartwell and Greer table was discussing a new associate, a young woman who had clerked for a federal judge and graduated second in her class from Emory and was joining the firm in the fall. They were saying good things about her, the way people say good things about a new person they have decided is worth saying good things about. And Gerald Oates, in the midst of this, said something to the table in the tone of a man making an observation he has made before and believes to be both accurate and generous. Said that talent found its level eventually, and that was why the right schools and the right rooms mattered, because they were where talent went when it was ready. He was not talking about Nadia. He was not talking about anyone in particular. He was articulating a worldview. The worldview was that the people who ended up in the right rooms had gotten there by belonging there, and the people who hadn't gotten there for the same reason. He was not cruel about it. He said it the way you say something you have never had any reason to examine. Nadia set his burgundy on the table and went to check on table 11. She gave her notice at Carver's 8 months later, the week she opened the shared office space above the dry cleaner on Milk Boulevard, and hung a sign on the door that said Osei Legal Group in letters she had cut herself from a hardware store stencil kit because she was not yet billing enough to pay a sign maker. The first client was a small business owner who needed a commercial lease reviewed. Nadia charged $400 and took 3 hours on it. Because she wanted it to be perfect. Because everything she was going to build had to start with being perfect. The client referred her to another client. That client referred her to another. In year 2, she hired her first associate, a recent graduate who had passed the bar and couldn't find a position at any firm in Savannah, and who Nadia called after reading a notice in the Bar Association newsletter and offered a position that paid less than she deserved and came with a promise that it would pay more as the firm grew. It grew. By year 3, 2 associates. By year 5, 6 attorneys total and a proper office on Bay Street with a receptionist and a glass door with Osei Legal Group in gold letters applied by an actual sign maker. In year 6, she tried the case. The Harmon Industries commercial dispute, a breach of contract claim involving $4 million in alleged damages. A case that 3 larger firms had declined to take on contingency because the liability question was genuinely complex, and the client was not the kind of company that generated referrals. Nadia had taken it on contingency because she had read the contracts, and the breach was clear, and she did not need a referral from Harmon Industries. She needed the verdict. She tried it over 9 days before a Chatham County jury. The jury deliberated for 4 hours and returned a verdict of $6.2 million. The case was covered in the Savannah Morning News on a Thursday, which was the day of the week the Hartwell and Greer table ate at Carver's. Though Nadia did not think about that when she read the coverage. She thought about her father, who had died 8 months earlier, who had known about the firm and the Bay Street office and the 6 attorneys, but had not lived to see the verdict. She thought about what he would have said. She thought he would have said he knew. The call from Hartwell and Greer came 14 months after the verdict. A junior partner named Melissa Cho, 31 years old, 3 years out of law school, who had joined the firm 2 years after Nadia left Carver's, and who had never seen Nadia carry a plate in her life, called Osei Legal's main number and asked to speak with Miss Osei about a co-counsel arrangement. The case was a commercial dispute with a former Hartwell and Greer client, the kind of matter where the firm needed local expertise and a litigator with a specific track record and was willing to share the work to get it. Melissa described the case in the preliminary call. Nadia listened. The case was the kind she had been building toward. She said she was interested. She said they should meet. Melissa said they typically held initial co-counsel meetings at Carver's. She asked if that worked for Miss Osei. Nadia said that worked fine. She arrived 7 minutes early, which was her habit. Thomas was at the podium. He looked up from the reservation book when she came through the door, and his face did the thing it did. The recognition, the understanding, the quiet satisfaction of a man who had known 8 years ago at the end of a training week that the story would move in a direction worth seeing. He said her name. She said his. He asked how she was. She said she was well. She asked how he was. He said he was very well, and that the table 7 party was already seated and waiting. He walked her over himself, which he did not need to do, and which he did anyway, in the precise, deliberate way of a man performing a small ceremony. The 5 Hartwell and Greer attorneys rose when she approached. Melissa Cho introduced herself with the warmth of someone who had done her research and was genuinely pleased to be meeting the person she had read about. The 2 associates beside her followed suit. The 4th attorney, a partner named Crane, shook her hand with the straightforward efficiency of a man conducting a professional meeting. And Gerald Oates, at the end of the table, older, a little grayer, the salmon on order as always, extended his hand and said her name, and then looked at her face, and went very still. He had it in 2 seconds, the placement of the face, the name, the white tablecloth and the crystal stemware, and then the gold letters on the glass door of the Bay Street office and the Thursday morning newspaper, and the 14 attorneys, and the $6. $2 million verdict, and the 11 years between the last time he had watched her walk away from his table and this moment when she was standing at its head as someone he needed. All of it arrived together. His hand completed the handshake on momentum. Nadia shook it. She sat down. She accepted the menu from Thomas, who placed it with a small, precise inclination of his head that only she understood. And she ordered a sparkling water. And she opened her portfolio, and she began to talk about the case. She was entirely professional. She asked good questions and gave direct answers and demonstrated, over the next 75 minutes, exactly the kind of command of commercial litigation that the case required and that the junior partner's research had promised. The associates took notes. Melissa asked 2 follow-up questions that suggested she had done serious preparation. Gerald Oates said almost nothing for the first 40 minutes. He was listening, which was something he was genuinely good at. And what he was hearing was reorganizing something in him that had been arranged a certain way for a very long time. At some point in the 3rd quarter of the meeting, a moment arrived that was not in the agenda and was not the product of anything deliberate on Nadia's part. Gerald Oates asked, in the careful voice of a man choosing words he had been turning over since she sat down, how long she had been practicing. She told him. He asked where she had done her evening study. She told him. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said he believed they had met before, and she said they had. And he asked in what context, and she said she had worked at Carver's for 11 years, and she said she had served his table many times over that period. The table went absolutely still. Not with discomfort, though discomfort was there, working through the room the way it works through rooms when something arrives that rearranges the furniture of what people thought they understood. With something else. with the specific quality of stillness that comes when 11 years of a person's life collapse into a single present moment and everyone in the room has to figure out where to put what they now know. Melissa Cho, who had called Osai Legal's main number 14 months ago and asked to speak with Miss Osai, and who had done the research and read the coverage and prepared seriously for this meeting, looked at Nadia with the expression of someone who has just received a piece of information that makes the story larger than she understood it to be. The two associates beside her had stopped writing. The partner named Crane, who had given no indication all meeting of anything beyond professional assessment, set down his pen on the table in a gesture he did not appear to be aware of making. They were all, in that moment, doing the same calculation, mapping the woman who had just spent 75 minutes demonstrating formidable command of commercial litigation onto the woman who had brought their water glasses and their wine, and understanding that these had always been the same person, and that the image that had made one of those versions invisible had been entirely in the eye of the beholder. Gerald Oates looked at her for a long time without speaking. He was not a man who performed emotion. He was a man who had spent 40 years disciplining himself out of public feeling. What moved across his face in those seconds was not performance. It was the real thing, the recognition of what he had not seen and what his not seeing had cost. Not her. She had built, regardless, but him. What it had cost him was the chance to know, for 11 years, who was in the room. The man who had said that talent found its level and that some people were born to their station sat across from the person who had heard him say it and had built a law firm anyway, and the distance between the statement and the reality was a distance he was going to have to live with from this moment forward. Not as punishment, as information. The permanent kind. He said he did not know. Nadia said she knew he didn't. He said he owed her an apology. She considered this for a moment, not performatively, genuinely, the way a person considers a thing they have thought about before and is encountering in real form for the first time. Then she said that the work they were about to do together was the apology she was interested in. She said she would rather build something than receive something. She said she had always felt that way. Gerald Oates nodded once, the way a man nods when he has been corrected by something true and has chosen to accept the correction. The meeting continued. The co-counsel arrangement was formalized the following week. The case resolved 18 months later with a settlement favorable to the client. Osai Legal Group and Hartwell and Greer split the fees according to the agreement. It was not the last time they worked together. Thomas was at the podium when she left that first evening. He asked how the meeting had gone. She said it had gone well. He said he thought it would. She asked how he had known. He said he had known since the last day of her training, when he had told her that some rooms would try to make her forget the difference between who she was and what she did, and she had looked at him with the expression of someone who had already decided not to forget it. He said she had never looked like she was going to forget it. Not once. In 11 years, Nadia stood in the lobby of Carver's. The crystal stemware and the chandeliers and the dark oak floors she had crossed 300 times a year for 11 years with plates balanced on her arms, and she looked at the room for a moment. Then she said good night to Thomas. She walked through the glass door. She drove to Bay Street. She had briefs to finish. There was always work to do. There had always been work to do. That had never once been the problem.